Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 288. We're going to talk about medical debt, the ceasefire briefly, and the fact that my family is a family of troublemakers. Okay, so at the school where I teach, we have this morning video that we watch. I think my kids watch CNN Kids or something like Kids CNN or something like that. In public school, that's what they watch. And in Christian schools, they watch something called World Watch. And they have lots of interesting stories, which I generally have lots of things to say. And one thing that came up, which I thought was kind of interesting, and kind of gives you a clue into how this political system works, but it talked about how medical bills are removed from credit reports. So the CFPB, I got this off the CFPB website, the consumerfinance.gov, and CFPB stands for Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There's a final ruling that will remove billions of dollars of medical bills from credit reports and end coercive debt collection practices that weaponize the credit reporting system. It's to prevent the use of medical information used by lenders and prohibit lenders from using medical information in their lending decisions. The CFPB has found that medical debts provide little predictive value to lenders about borrowers' ability to repay their debts. And consumers frequently report receiving inaccurate bills or being asked to pay bills that should have been covered by insurance or financial assistance programs. And that's just a snapshot. I mean, the article is much longer, but that's pretty much enough. It's enough information for us to make a couple of comments. Number one, it's kind of a problem because it means that the lenders, whoever's going to now lend money to these people who have these medical debts, may not get paid, right? I mean, if the person already owes a lot of money in medical bills, how are they going to borrow more money now, right? And pay all of it back? It's just going to be, it's a little bit of a conundrum there, right? So arguably, yes, some people are in a bind, possibly because of clerical mistakes, slow insurance process clearing. But what is being overlooked here, it's the government interference in healthcare, which made the prices so high in the first place. Just a couple episodes ago, I did an episode on my parents and healthcare and how they didn't have any medical insurance, but it was okay, right? You could get the medical treatments that you need, which today are considered extremely, extremely expensive. And so instead of trying to do these sort of, how shall I say, public image type things, you have to look at the whole system. Like, why is it this way? Why is it that people have these ridiculous, redunculous bills in the first place? And I did an episode also on the Oklahoma Surgery Center as well, and how the pricing there is so much lower than corporate hospitals, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that I've already gone over in the last couple of days that should contribute to this discussion. It's just that this story popped up yesterday or the day before, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I had that discussion with the kids, but they're in sixth grade, so it's like how much, and so you can tell that for me, it's like I always want to say something and make comments, but how much of this do the kids really understand? I don't know. But I still talk anyway, and some of them realize that there's something going on. And I'm hoping that they may not remember most of the substance of the arguments, but to be suspicious in their hearts, right? So it's the system itself which is broken, and it's not just insurance and billing. If you look at the cholesterol lie, right? So the government comes up with this drug that can kind of control cholesterol. Is it significant? No, not really. So what they do is they go into a propaganda campaign, propaganda campaign to basically go to war against fat, right? And so everything, it was like the Korean or Asian person's dream, right? Everything that they heard, all the non-sciencey things that they heard when they were little, they get to actually say it out loud. Like if you eat too much bacon, you're going to get clogged arteries, that kind of thing. Fatty foods lead to clogged arteries, okay? And at some level, it kind of makes I guess it makes sense for certain people. It never really made sense to me because the fat doesn't just go into your blood. I mean, it's digested, right? And anyway, and so it didn't really make sense to me, but of course, everyone kept saying it, and I was really young. So it's like, okay, fine, I can't eat bacon anymore. But uh, it was sugar the whole time. It was sugar all along, which was the cause of hardening arteries, heart disease, all that stuff. It was, and it all this information came out that cholesterol has nothing to do with anything, but it's sugar, too much sugar in our diet. And all of those studies which promoted cholesterol and downplayed the role of sugar in heart disease, funded by the sugar cartels in America. I didn't bother looking up those sources, but I used to talk about it all the time when I was in when I was teaching at the university. And so this idea of helping out these people who have these big medical bills, you're just looking at the surface, right? And so all these people who try to make a big deal out of say, look, see, I took the medical bills off of credit reports so that these people who are in massive debt, they get to borrow more money. And their creditors, the people who are lending them money, will never know that the possibility of them never getting paid back is very, very high. And I can empathize and sympathize on one hand, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem, right? And so by focusing only on the superficial, the symptoms, not the cause, but the symptoms, then people can go on and continue to make money. And and if you're listening to this podcast, then you know that our financial system is built on borrowing. And so people need to continue to borrow more and more money in order to make this system continue to function, right? As soon as people stop borrowing, as soon as credit dries up, right, then everything begins to crash. Okay. So that's that. So a little look at medical bills being removed from credit reports, how it's a clue into this huge cesspool of problems, right? And it was just from some innocuous story on a Christian news, morning news program for middle schoolers, right? And elementary school kids, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Next, I want to change gears. I want to talk about an episode that Judge Napolitano had with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, retired. He used to work under Colin Powell, who of course has passed away, but he used to be Secretary of Defense, Defense, or Secretary of State, one of those high cabinet positions, right? He's the one that sold us on the Gulf War. I think the second Gulf War, or something like that. And so it was really interesting. They talked about a lot of things, but one thing that really smacked me in the face was when Colonel Wilkerson said that it's not Israel that controls the United States, but it's the United States that controls Israel. And everyone is perfectly fine thinking, allowing everyone to think that it's the other way around. And so it looks like from our level that Israel is making all these donations to all these politicians, and so they're doing the bidding of the Israelis. And just spitballing here, right? But Wilkerson says that his contacts, people that he knows in, the government, has basically showed him enough information, which basically shows that it's the other way around. So where's all the money coming from? Well, the United States has printing presses, and we already know that there's a lot of, money laundering that's happening through Ukraine So why not also through Israel? In fact, why not through every single country that the United States gives and sends money to, that it gets laundered and then comes back to the United States through lobbyists and so-called rich people, right? I thought it was interesting, and I thought I would share in case you didn't, if you didn't hear it or you didn't see it, right? Because all I ever see is how all these politicians are in the pocket of Israelis, which is sort of like a truism at this point, right? Everyone kind of acknowledges that who's not a fanatical Zionist, right? To a Zionist, they're just doing the right thing, right? So it was very different. And I'm all about different subjectivities, different possible ways of looking at a situation to get a better picture of really what's going on. And so I thought I would share just in case you didn't hear it. Uh, yeah, so I thought I'd and Wilkerson also added that Trump is a wild card. So negotiating this ceasefire, which might not actually be a ceasefire, right? Uh, maybe it's Trump who's making false promises, right? And they went into this idea that Trump wants victories. He wants deals, great deals that he can promote himself, his administration, and moving forward. So it's interesting, and it's kind of it's sort of a wait and see. My hopium is still pretty dead, but you never know, right? How things will actually turn out. And it's not like I'm saying that all of a sudden he'll be a champion for freedom. I'm not saying that. It's just that I'll take the wins uh, in any way. And if it is true that it's the United States that is using Israel, then it's possible that there can be more change through a Trump kind of administration. And, Professor Mearsheimer and Colonel Wilkerson both had interviews with Judge Napolitano today. And the two interviews together were very interesting. And, okay, my hopium has gotten a little bit brighter, but only a little bit, right? So basically, you're just looking for wins in a sea of just depressing information. But we'll see. But it is disgusting to see all these politicians skating on fake accomplishments, right? Including Biden's farewell speech. I was going to do something about it, but then I can't stand listening to the guy. And other people have actually done commentaries. Dave Smith, comic Dave Smith, and Peter Schiff also did a summary as well. And I just can't bring myself to watch him. It's just, oh, he's just so, it's sad and disgusting at the same time. All right. And there's so many lies. It's just, I can't stand it. It's just, I, life is too short to have to sit through all those lies. And so there, all these fake accomplishments while they come after people like you and me and all those people who are still in prison because of January 6th, right? The one person who I guess somehow is able to upload videos from prison, right? He said they're all imprisoned for being a Trump supporter. And really, that's what it is. It's not like they were truly insurrectionists, right? It's the FBI, all these agent provocateurs who are embedded with all these protesters who instigated and tried to get all these people to do violence. Now, if there was justice, everyone who participated in the January 6th lie, promoting it as an insurrection, they should take their places. They should take the places of all the J6ers. That would be that would be kind of cool. And I'd like to close today with a story about my family. Okay. And maybe, you can turn it off if this is of no interest to you, but I thought it was funny, so I thought I would share. Um, uh, so I have troublemakers in quotation marks because we as a family, we don't see it as trouble, right? But rather a willingness to do what we perceive is right. Some people might call it integrity. Some people might call it honesty, right? So if we see things that are not right, then we're going to say something about it. We're going to do something about it. We're not going to just let it happen without any kind of comment or, you know, resistance. So once upon a time, my father, maybe 20 years ago or so, he really got into Korean history through his family tree. And one thing that if you don't know anything about Asian culture, the whole sort of Confucian, non-Christian history of, of a lot of Asian societies is that the firstborn son must take care of, you know, the whole filial piety thing, you might have heard of it, must take care of his parents. But it's not just his parents. It's his parents and his parents' parents and his parents' parents' parents and so on and so forth. In other words, the firstborn in the family must take care of all of the previous generations' graves, right? Must maintain them, you know, weed them, make sure that, you know, that they don't disappear and are forgotten. And you can see that over time, like 10 generations, 20 generations, there are a lot of graves. And after a while, that's all you're doing. And so my grandfather was the keeper of the family tree. And at this point, it's a massive, massive book, right? So from my to my generation, it's 70, I believe 74, 75 generations after the king, right? So the original uh, person in Korea, Kim, right? It's like three-fifths of all Koreans have the last name Kim. But not all of them are descended from this particular king, who's the first Kim in Korea. And so I'm 70, 75 generations after him. It's all in the family tree. And so my dad got really curious about that and started looking into the family tree. And then, you know, he always told us about how his father converted to Christianity. And so he had to give the family tree book to another relative, which you have to understand is punishable by death, right? I mean, the family does not take that lightly. And because if you mess that up, you basically bring curses on the entire family from all the spirits of the previous generations. But of course, my grandfather became a Christian. He was like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, we're not going to do that anymore. And somehow got through all of that. That's how much of a troublemaker, pot stirrer that he was. And then, of course, there was the Japanese persecution. My grandfather and father went through that. They got beaten, publicly humiliated. My grandfather was arrested, taken down to the police station, tortured down there, et cetera, et cetera. He wasn't arrested because he wasn't a pastor, right? He was only an elder. And so he wasn't arrested and sent to prison. They just tortured him regularly and humiliated him and whatnot. And so my, my dad wondered, probably about his own, you know, sort of rebelliousness, counterculture, contrarian ways, right? He was very, very not your typical Korean dude. And he kind of got curious because his grandmother used to wear a headdress that only princesses or women of the court would wear. And when he was really little, like 6 years old or something, he would remember that his grandmother wore this headdress. And he was embarrassed because she was the only one in the whole town that wore it, right? And it's like, why are you being so goofy like that? You know, that kind of thing. And so eventually, fast forward 60 years, 60, 70 years later, he got curious, and so he found the new family that holds the family tree book, and he asked him to show the very first person of our family that came to the island. My father came from an island in South Korea, and so they showed him the grave marker, and my dad looked at the back, and I wish I wrote down all this stuff, but he said that it had something on there, which was the symbol of political exile. And it's like he read it, he recognized what it was, and he was like, wow, so my family, I don't know how many generations ago, 20, 30 generations ago, came to the island as political exiles. Now, at the time, you were sent into exile. You were banished from the Capitol because you spoke out against the king. And so my dad said that the only reason why a person or a family would have this kind of banishment exile is because you spoke out against the king. You didn't commit a crime, right? Otherwise, you'd be executed. So you were banished because you were right, but you were also in disagreement with the king, and so you were banished. And so I remember the story. I went downstairs. I told my wife. My wife looked at me and she said, "Family of troublemakers," right? Because that's the way I am as well. All my life, I questioned, I challenged everything, I pushed the limits, usually got in trouble, right? Until I finally figured out, well, you can't get in trouble all the time, especially if you're a pastor. And so now I take the approach of de-escalation. Okay, so this is all perpetual. Like we will always ever find trouble to cause or as a result of what other people have done. And so that's all I try to do now is de-escalate and try to figure out what would be a better solution, not compromise. Oh, I hate compromise, right? Because everyone loses, right? But what would be a better alternative, right? A third choice, a fourth choice that no one thought about before, but is far better than the original choices that people were fighting about. And that's where innovation comes from. That's where advancement comes from. That's where, entrepreneurial ideas come from, right? And so that's what I'm really into now. And so the so-called troublemaking that I do now is about trying to make people look beyond what's right in front of their face and figure out that, yes, there is something far, far better out there. You just have to lift your eyes and start looking around and looking for better solutions, better choices. And this leads to a better society. Anyway, I thought I would share that. This is where I get my trouble streak, and my whole family is like this. And I'm hoping that my kids are all like this as well. Pot stirrers, troublemakers to make society a better place. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you guys next time.